behind the grand gates of Windsor Castle, a quiet revolution was brewing. While the world watched and waited, Prince William and Catherine were making decisions that would reshape the very foundation of modern monarchy. As dawn broke over the English countryside on a crisp January morning in 2026, the future king and queen were about to announce changes so bold, so unprecedented, that even the most seasoned royal watchers would be left speechless. This wasn't just another royal engagement or charitable endeavor. This was the moment when tradition would meet innovation, when centuries-old protocols would bend to accommodate a new vision of service, and when two people carrying the weight of a crown would dare to rewrite the rules entirely. What happened next would either secure the monarchy's future for generations to come or challenge its very existence. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the world was watching. The mahogany desk in Prince William's private study had witnessed countless royal decisions over the decades, but none quite like this one. As February's pale morning light filtered through the tall windows of Adelaide Cottage, William sat across from Catherine, both holding steaming cups of tea that had grown cold during their intense 3-hour discussion. The weight of what they were about to propose to the palace felt heavier than any crown either would ever wear. Catherine traced the rim of her cup thoughtfully, her eyes distant as she considered the magnitude of their plan. They had been discussing this radical departure from royal tradition for months, but today felt different. Today, they were ready to take the leap that would either revolutionize the monarchy or create the biggest constitutional crisis since the abdication of Edward VIII. The catalyst for this bold decision had come from an unexpected source. 3 weeks earlier, during a routine visit to a youth center in Manchester, William had encountered 16-year-old Marcus, a brilliant teenager from a disadvantaged background who had developed an app to help homeless individuals find shelter and resources. What struck William wasn't just the ingenuity of the solution, but the fact that Marcus had achieved more tangible impact for society's most vulnerable in 6 months than some royal charities had managed in years. That evening, during the drive back to London, Catherine had voiced what they were both thinking. The traditional model of royal service, while well-intentioned, was becoming increasingly disconnected from the real challenges facing modern Britain and the Commonwealth. The endless ribbon cuttings, ceremonial functions, and carefully orchestrated public appearances felt hollow when measured against the urgent need for genuine social change. William had been carrying similar thoughts for years, but Catherine's perspective as someone who had experienced life outside royal circles before marriage brought a clarity that was both refreshing and sobering. She understood the value of authentic connection in ways that someone born into royalty might struggle to grasp. Her work with early childhood development had shown her that real change happened through sustained engagement, not symbolic gestures. The couple had spent countless evenings discussing how they could bridge the gap between royal privilege and genuine service. They envisioned a new model of monarchy that didn't just support causes from a distance, but actively participated in creating solutions. They wanted to use their platform not just to raise awareness, but to roll up their sleeves and work alongside the people they served. Their first major innovation was what they privately called the Community Immersion Program. Instead of brief, heavily protected visits to organizations and communities, they proposed spending extended periods living and working within the communities they sought to serve. This wasn't just about understanding problems intellectually, but experiencing them firsthand and developing solutions through genuine collaboration with those affected. The idea terrified the palace security team. Extended periods in ordinary communities meant longer exposure to potential threats, less controlled environments, and countless variables that made traditional protection protocols nearly impossible. But William and Catherine argued that the monarchy's greatest threat wasn't physical danger, but irrelevance. If the royal family couldn't find ways to meaningfully connect with and serve their subjects, their long-term survival was questionable regardless of how well they were protected. Catherine's background in art history and photography gave her a unique perspective on how to document and share these experiences. She proposed creating an unprecedented visual record of their community work, not through the traditional lens of royal photography, but through the honest, unvarnished documentation of real collaboration and shared effort. These images and stories would be shared directly with the public through digital platforms, bypassing traditional media filters that often sanitized royal experiences. The financial implications were staggering. Traditional royal engagements, while expensive, were predictable in their costs. This new model would require significant investment in security, logistics, and support systems for extended community engagement. More controversially, William and Catherine proposed redirecting a substantial portion of their traditional ceremonial duties toward this new approach, potentially reducing the monarchy's visible presence at some traditional events. The couple spent weeks developing detailed proposals, consulting with constitutional experts, security professionals, and community leaders. They knew that gaining approval would require more than just royal enthusiasm. They needed a comprehensive plan that addressed every possible concern while demonstrating clear benefits to both the monarchy and the communities they served. Catherine took the lead on developing the educational component of their proposal. She envisioned the creation of learning exchanges where young people from diverse backgrounds could work alongside royal family members on community projects, breaking down the traditional barriers between royalty and subjects. These programs would create pathways for genuinely diverse voices to influence royal decision-making while providing unprecedented opportunities for young people to develop leadership skills. William focused on the international implications. The Commonwealth realms were watching Britain's monarchy navigate modern challenges, and success or failure in adapting to contemporary needs would influence the future of royal institutions worldwide. He saw their bold experiment as potentially providing a template for how constitutional monarchies could remain relevant and valuable in the 21st century. The couple also recognized that their children's future would be fundamentally shaped by the success or failure of their innovation. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis would inherit either a strengthened, modernized institution or one that had been weakened by failed attempts at change. This added a deeply personal urgency to their professional calculations. As they finalized their proposal, both William and Catherine understood that they were asking the palace to bet the monarchy's future on their vision. Traditional royal duties had evolved slowly over centuries, with each generation making incremental adjustments rather than revolutionary changes. What they were proposing was unprecedented in its scope and ambition. The document they prepared for presentation to King Charles was over 200 pages long, covering everything from constitutional implications to security protocols to financial projections. It represented months of careful research and planning, but also a lifetime of observation and reflection on how the monarchy could better serve its purpose in modern society. On the morning they were scheduled to present their proposal, Catherine dressed carefully in a navy blue dress that projected both professionalism and approachability. This wasn't a day for royal finery or symbolic accessories. Today called for the kind of serious attire worn by people preparing to negotiate the future of an institution. William wore his finest suit, but no military decorations or royal insignia. Like Catherine, he understood that today's meeting required them to be seen not as symbols of tradition, but as innovators prepared to lead the monarchy into uncharted territory. As they walked through the corridors of Buckingham Palace toward the meeting that would determine the monarchy's future direction, both felt the weight of history pressing down on them. Every portrait on the walls represented generations of royals who had navigated their own challenges and changes, but none had proposed anything quite so radical as what William and Catherine were about to present. The proposal represented more than just a new approach to royal duty, it was a complete reimagining of what it meant to serve as a royal family member in the modern world. If approved, it would require not just William and Catherine, but the entire royal institution, to step boldly into an uncertain but potentially transformative future. Their footsteps echoed through the palace halls as they approached the door that stood between the monarchy's traditional past and its revolutionary future. King Charles listened in complete silence for nearly 2 hours as William and Catherine presented their revolutionary proposal. The ornate walls of his private office seemed to absorb every word as the future king and queen methodically outlined their vision for transforming royal service. When they finished, the only sound was the gentle ticking of an 18th-century clock that had witnessed countless royal deliberations. The king's initial reaction was not what they had expected. Instead of immediate concern about security risks or constitutional implications, Charles leaned back in his chair and smiled slowly. He had spent decades advocating for a more environmentally conscious and socially engaged monarchy, often facing resistance from traditionalists who preferred the established order. Seeing his son and daughter-in-law propose such boldly progressive changes felt like validation of his own long-held beliefs about the monarchy's potential for positive impact. However, Charles also understood the institutional challenges better than anyone. The monarch's role was not just to approve or disapprove of such proposals, but to ensure that any changes strengthened rather than weakened the crown's ability to serve the people effectively. The proposal would require approval from multiple government departments, extensive consultation with Commonwealth leaders, and careful coordination with constitutional experts across multiple jurisdictions. The first major hurdle came from the Cabinet Office, which handles coordination between the government and the royal household. Senior civil servants raised immediate concerns about the security implications of extended community engagement. Traditional royal visits were carefully controlled affairs with multiple layers of protection and predetermined exit strategies. What William and Catherine proposed would require developing entirely new security protocols for situations that had never been encountered before. Dame Margaret Thornton, the cabinet secretary, spent 3 intense weeks reviewing the proposal with her team before requesting a private meeting with the royal couple. Her reputation for frank speaking was legendary in Whitehall circles, and both William and Catherine knew that her support would be crucial for gaining broader government approval. The meeting took place in a nondescript government building in Westminster, far from the grandeur of palace settings. Dame Margaret's opening words set the tone for what would be a brutally honest assessment of their proposal's challenges and opportunities. She acknowledged the innovative thinking behind their plan while simultaneously outlining the complex web of legal, security, and constitutional issues that would need to be resolved. The British government had never before dealt with senior royals requesting to live and work within ordinary communities for extended periods. Every aspect of such arrangements would need careful consideration, from insurance liability to diplomatic protocols when visiting Commonwealth territories. Catherine found herself taking the lead in addressing many of Dame Margaret's concerns. Her background outside the royal family gave her credibility when discussing the practical aspects of community engagement. She had lived as an ordinary citizen, understood the rhythms of normal community life, and could speak authentically about the benefits and challenges of the approach they were proposing. William's military experience proved valuable when discussing security arrangements. He understood risk assessment and operational planning in ways that helped bridge the gap between royal expectations and security requirements. His service as a search and rescue pilot had taught him that meaningful service often required accepting calculated risks that bureaucratic caution might otherwise prohibit. The breakthrough came when Dame Margaret suggested a pilot program. Rather than implementing the full scope of their proposal immediately, she recommended beginning with a carefully managed trial in a single community, with comprehensive monitoring and evaluation systems in place. This approach would allow them to identify and resolve practical challenges while building evidence for the program's effectiveness. William and Catherine exchanged glances, recognizing both the opportunity and the compromise inherent in this suggestion. A pilot program would delay their broader vision but provide a pathway to eventual implementation. After a brief whispered consultation, Catherine nodded to Dame Margaret, accepting the modified approach. The selection of the pilot community became the next major challenge. The location needed to offer genuine opportunities for meaningful engagement while providing reasonable security arrangements. It had to be representative enough that lessons learned could be applied to other communities, but unique enough to capture public attention and demonstrate the program's innovative approach. After extensive consultation with community leaders, security experts, and local government officials, they selected Millbrook, a former mining community in South Wales that had been struggling with economic transition for decades. The town had strong community organizations, diverse challenges that would allow William and Catherine to engage with multiple aspects of community life, and a population size that made comprehensive security arrangements feasible. The announcement strategy required months of careful planning. Traditional royal announcements followed established protocols, with information released through official channels and carefully managed media access. This announcement needed to convey the revolutionary nature of their approach while reassuring traditionalists that the monarchy's core values remained unchanged. Catherine suggested that they bypass traditional media channels for the initial announcement, instead speaking directly to the public through a live digital broadcast from Millbrook itself. This approach would allow them to explain their vision in their own words while demonstrating their commitment to direct community engagement from the very beginning. The broadcast was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in early March, with advance notice provided to major media outlets but no exclusive access granted to any particular organization. William and Catherine would speak from the community center where they planned to base their operations, surrounded by local residents who had been involved in planning their extended stay. The weeks leading up to the announcement were filled with intensive preparation. Security teams worked around the clock to establish protocols that would protect the royal couple while allowing genuine community interaction. Local officials coordinated with royal staff to ensure that essential services and infrastructure could support the additional attention that would inevitably follow the announcement. Catherine spent considerable time preparing for the questions and criticism that would inevitably follow. Media training sessions focused not on providing scripted responses, but on helping her articulate the authentic motivations behind their decision. She knew that skeptics would question whether privileged royals could genuinely understand or contribute to addressing community challenges. William prepared for the constitutional questions that would dominate expert commentary. Legal scholars would debate whether extended community engagement was compatible with the monarchy's symbolic role, and he needed to be ready to explain how their approach actually strengthened rather than weakened the crown's connection to its subjects. The morning of the announcement, both felt a nervous excitement that reminded them of their wedding day. They were about to commit themselves publicly to an approach that would fundamentally change how they served as members of the royal family. Success would validate their vision and potentially transform the monarchy's role in modern society. Failure would damage both their personal reputations and the institution they represented. As they walked into the Millbrook Community Center, surrounded by residents who had welcomed them into their community, William and Catherine felt the weight of anticipation from millions of people who would be watching their announcement. The familiar red light of broadcast cameras reminded them that they were speaking not just to the assembled crowd, but to subjects throughout the United Kingdom and Commonwealth realms who were waiting to understand what this bold new phase of royal service would mean for them. The moment had arrived to explain to the world why they believed the monarchy's future depended on revolutionary change rather than comfortable tradition. Their next words would either launch a new chapter in royal history or create a crisis that could reshape the institution forever. Standing before the cameras, surrounded by the community that had agreed to be partners in their experiment, William and Catherine prepared to reveal their vision for a monarchy that served not from a distance, but from within the communities it represented. The words they were about to speak had been crafted through months of careful preparation, but the conviction behind them came from years of questioning whether traditional royal service was sufficient for the challenges of modern society. The red recording lights blinked on, and the future of the monarchy hung in the balance as they began to speak. The live broadcast from Millbrook Community Center reached an estimated global audience of 200 million people, making it one of the most watched royal addresses in modern history. William and Catherine spoke with a directness and authenticity that surprised even seasoned royal commentators. Gone were the carefully crafted diplomatic phrases that typically characterized official royal communications. Instead, they spoke as two individuals genuinely committed to reimagining what royal service could accomplish in the 21st century. Catherine began by acknowledging the unprecedented nature of their announcement. She explained how months of community consultation had shaped their understanding of what residents actually needed from royal involvement. Rather than brief visits focused on ceremonial recognition, communities consistently expressed desire for sustained engagement that could contribute to lasting positive change. William addressed the constitutional concerns directly, explaining how their approach actually strengthened the monarchy's connection to its foundational purpose of service. He noted that the crown's legitimacy had always depended on its ability to remain relevant and valuable to the people it served. Their community immersion program represented evolution rather than revolution, adapting ancient principles of service to contemporary circumstances. The reaction was immediate and polarized. Traditional monarchists expressed horror at what they saw as the degradation of royal dignity and the abandonment of centuries-old protocols. Progressive voices hailed the announcement as long overdue modernization that could secure the monarchy's future relevance. Social media exploded with debate about whether the proposal represented inspired leadership or dangerous precedent. The first major test came 3 days later when William and Catherine moved into a modest terraced house on High Street in Millbrook. The sight of future monarchs carrying their own luggage and grocery shopping at the local convenience store created a media frenzy unlike anything seen since their wedding. International news crews descended on the small Welsh town, transforming the quiet community into a global focal point. Security arrangements required unprecedented creativity. Close protection officers had to blend into the community while maintaining constant vigilance. Local police worked with royal protection teams to develop protocols that allowed William and Catherine to walk freely through the town while ensuring their safety. The delicate balance between accessibility and security became a daily negotiation that sometimes tested everyone's patience. The royal couple's first week in Millbrook focused on listening and learning rather than implementing predetermined programs. They attended community meetings, visited local businesses, and spent hours in residents' homes understanding the challenges facing families trying to build stable lives in an economically struggling region. Catherine's background in photography proved invaluable as she documented these interactions with an intimacy and authenticity that traditional royal photography never achieved. Their most significant early challenge came from an unexpected source. Several longtime community volunteers expressed resentment at the royal presence, feeling that their years of dedicated local service were being overshadowed by celebrity involvement. Margaret Evans, who had coordinated the community food bank for 15 years, publicly questioned whether royal participation would turn essential services into media spectacles rather than genuine aid for struggling families. Catherine requested a private meeting with Margaret, arriving at her home with homemade scones and a willingness to listen to criticism without defensiveness. The conversation lasted 3 hours and proved pivotal in establishing the credibility of their community engagement. Margaret later described Catherine's genuine interest in understanding local dynamics and her willingness to defer to existing expertise as evidence of authentic rather than performative commitment. William found his military experience surprisingly relevant to community organizing. The skills he had developed in coordinating complex operations with multiple stakeholders translated well to bringing together diverse community groups around shared goals. His work with the local unemployment support group applied project management techniques to helping residents navigate bureaucratic systems and identify career development opportunities. The breakthrough moment came 6 weeks into their residency, when Catherine discovered that several local families were struggling with children's literacy development but couldn't access quality support services. Working with the primary school headteacher and parent volunteers, she developed an innovative program that combined her early childhood development expertise with community resources to create sustainable literacy support. The program's success wasn't measured in media attention but in measurable improvements in children's reading skills and increased parental confidence in supporting their children's education. When standardized test scores showed significant improvement after just 3 months, education officials from across Wales requested information about replicating the approach in other communities. William's parallel work with young adults transitioning out of the care system created similarly impressive results. His combination of royal connections and grassroots understanding enabled him to bridge gaps between national policy and local implementation that had frustrated social workers for years. Companies that had never considered hiring care leavers agreed to pilot employment programs after William personally explained the potential benefits. The most powerful moment of their Millbrook experience came during an impromptu community meeting following a local factory closure that threatened 200 jobs. Rather than offering traditional royal sympathy, William and Catherine rolled up their sleeves and spent the entire weekend working with union representatives, local officials, and business leaders to develop alternative employment strategies. Catherine's contacts in the art world proved unexpectedly valuable when she identified potential markets for crafts and artistic works that local residents could produce. William's military networks provided connections to companies seeking reliable suppliers for various products. Their combined efforts didn't save every job, but they helped establish new economic opportunities that provided genuine alternatives for many affected families. The success of these initiatives attracted attention from government ministers who had initially been skeptical of the community immersion concept. The Department for Work and Pensions requested detailed briefings on the employment programs William had helped develop, while the Department for Education sought information about Catherine's literacy initiatives. International attention intensified when delegations from Commonwealth countries visited Millbrook to observe the royal couple's community work firsthand. The Prime Minister of New Zealand spent 2 days shadowing William and Catherine, later describing their approach as potentially transformative for how constitutional monarchies could contribute to addressing contemporary social challenges. The most significant validation came from an unexpected source. Marcus, the teenage app developer whose work had originally inspired their community immersion concept, visited Millbrook as part of a youth leadership exchange program Catherine had organized. His assessment was characteristically direct. The royal couple had moved beyond symbolic support to become genuine collaborators in community development, contributing skills and connections that complemented rather than overshadowed local expertise. By the end of their planned 6-month residency, William and Catherine had participated in establishing 5 ongoing community programs, contributed to securing employment for 43 local residents, and helped attract over £2 million in external investment to local businesses and organizations. More importantly, they had demonstrated that royal service could extend far beyond traditional ceremonial functions. The final community meeting before their departure drew residents from across South Wales. The atmosphere was celebratory but also bittersweet as people reflected on how the royal presence had transformed both the community and their understanding of what monarchy could accomplish. Several speakers noted that William and Catherine had not just worked in Millbrook but had become genuine members of the community. Their departure strategy had been carefully planned to avoid the impression that royal interest ended when the cameras moved elsewhere. They committed to quarterly return visits and established permanent funding for the programs they had helped create. More significantly, they announced plans to replicate the Millbrook experience in communities across the United Kingdom and Commonwealth, with lessons learned from their Welsh pilot informing future implementations. The drive back to Windsor felt symbolic as William and Catherine reflected on how profoundly the experience had changed both their understanding of royal service and their confidence in the monarchy's potential for positive impact. They had proven that constitutional monarchy could adapt to contemporary needs without abandoning its fundamental values. The final evaluation reports praised their community engagement as unprecedented in its depth and effectiveness. Security assessments noted that extended community residency, while challenging to manage, had actually enhanced rather than compromised their safety by building genuine relationships with local residents who became active partners in ensuring their protection. As 2026 progressed, applications from communities across the Commonwealth requesting similar royal residency programs overwhelmed palace offices. William and Catherine's bold experiment had not just succeeded but had created demand for a fundamentally new model of royal service that combined traditional values with innovative approaches to addressing contemporary challenges. Their Millbrook experience became the template for royal community engagement, establishing protocols that other royal family members began adopting for their own public service work. The monarchy had successfully evolved to meet 21st century expectations while strengthening rather than weakening its connection to the people it served. Looking back on their decision to propose such radical changes, both William and Catherine recognized that their willingness to risk failure had ultimately secured the monarchy's future relevance in ways that cautious incrementalism never could have achieved. They had transformed not just their own roles but had provided a roadmap for how ancient institutions could thrive in modern societies by embracing bold adaptation rather than defensive tradition.